How to use benchmarks for headcount optimization. In the previous lecture, we have discussed the general concept of benchmark analysis. Now let's apply it to headcount optimization. So we said in the previous lecture that we have two types of benchmarks, internal and external ones, and they will be used in a bit different manner when it comes to headcount. So let's start with internal ones. When it comes to internal ones, we can, for example, compare salaries for employees on the same position, working in different departments or even in the same department, or between factories or between sites, stores, depending on the industry in which the company works. We can, in a similar manner, also compare work done per one person. It can be expressed in the number of tasks performed per one person or man hours. And we will have an example of that later on. So this can be done within a specific department, or you can compare departments that are roughly similar in nature. This type of benchmarks work very good for the head office and the back office. Now, if we are comparing, for example, different factories or different business units, we can look at labor cost expressed as a percentage of revenue or revenue level for one FTE. In some cases, it is also worth comparing margin level per one FTE. Those three type of benchmarks help us identify in which places they may have problem with too big headcount and what is the potential to reduce the headcount. So when we use internal benchmarks, we do the estimations only on the basis of internal data. The good thing about internal benchmark is the fact that we know whether we can compare certain items or not. With the external benchmarks, it's a little bit more difficult. But before we move to external benchmarks, let's have a look at one example where we'll be using internal benchmarks. So imagine that you have checked in a specific customer service department what people are doing, and you have discovered that they are taking care of different number of customers. So for example, employee 3 is servicing 30 customers, whereas employee 4 is servicing only 19 customers. So this would suggest that there is a certain discrepancy in the efficiency level. And if we were able to increase the average to the level of the best performance, we would most likely be able to have a lower headcount, so probably get rid of one or two people. This sort of internal benchmarks help you identify not only the potential headcount reduction, but also you can identify the places with the best practices. So in this case, it will be employee 5 and employee 3. Now let's move to external benchmarks, and here we would be comparing first of all revenue level per one FTE, EBITDA level per one FTE, and labor cost expressed as a percentage of revenues. Those sort of benchmarks help you identify roughly what is the potential in headcount reduction. Bear in mind that you have to have a roughly comparable data, and in some cases, some companies may have lower number of people because they are using independent contractors and third parties. So in other words, artificially, the employment in their structure is smaller than in the company that we are analyzing. So always try to make sure that you're comparing apples to apples. Now, if we want to go into more details, we can also look at salaries on a similar position. And here we would compare salaries in the firm we are analyzing against market or against competitors. And we can also look at the revenue level per one FTE in the head office or number of FTEs per one site, for example, store or factory. So in the case of the last two benchmarks, they would be extremely useful if we want to analyze a specific part of the company, how efficient it is. So if we were looking at the number of FTEs per one site, number of people that specific sites requires to work, this would give us an idea what is the potential of headcount reduction in this site. Whereas if we look at the head office, obviously this will give us some idea how we can reduce the headcount in the head office. So let's have a look at a short example of benchmark comparison when it comes to external benchmarks. So let's imagine that we are comparing three firms and we want to see what is the headcount reduction. So in this case, we have company A, B, and C, and we have calculated the revenue per one FTE. Obviously, the higher the revenue per one FTE, the better. So most likely company B is the most efficient one, whereas company C is the least efficient one. So if company C implements part of the things that company B is doing, most likely they can reduce to some extent the headcount and increase this KPI closer to the level of company B or company A. So that's in short when it comes to benchmarks and how you can use them. We will later on use them more extensively in the case studies.